and gentlemen, welcome back to the World Cloud Show Africa. And right now we are on our panel, Women in Tech panel, The Rise of African Cloud, a Cloud-Connected Africa. We're looking at talking about how artificial intelligence is changing the world of cloud computing. We're looking at talking about key to speeding up Africa's development being cloud computing, security policies for cloud computing, Africa powering cloud adoption across enterprises, effective broadband on efficiency of cloud network. Will Africa enter a new era of high-speed internet? For this panel, we're joined by our eminent panelists. First up, we've got Lavina, Director General Global Council for the Promotion of International Trade, South Africa. While Lavina has harvested a blended spread between multidisciplinary, multi-sector, and multi-technologies. Her passion to unlock and be the consciousness for Africa's in field of artificial intelligence and emerging technologies is evident. Thank you so much, Lavina, for joining us on the World Cloud Show.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
Pleasure is ours. We also are now joined by Chinenye, Chief Information Security Officer, National Identity Management Commission, Nigeria. Chinenye has over 18 years of professional experience from a diverse background in information security, IT management, enterprise architecture, privacy, and compliance. She's somebody who holds several industry certifications, including CISSP, ISO, IEC 27001, 2013 Master, MCSE Private Cloud, OCP, ITIL, and Cisco certifications. She's also an advocate of implementing the best practice security risk controls, common security frameworks, and standards within an organization. Thank you so much, Chinenye, for joining us today live.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone.
Great to have you as well. We are now joined by Sylvia, founder, CEO, GlobalX Investments Limited, GlobalX Innovation Labs, Kenya. An award-winning entrepreneur, Sylvia is the country co-founder, chapter lead Kenya for Women in Tech, which is WITA Vita. The WITA, which is Women in Tech Africa, has won the United National Equals in Tech Award leadership category in 2018. She's somebody who in 2014, a Tech Women Fellow and initiative of the US Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. With this, I welcome Sylvia on the stage and screen. Thank you, Sylvia, for joining us today.
Thank you. I look forward to this discussion.
Likewise. And now it is time to introduce to you the moderator of this session. Well, we're joined by Sithembile Songo, the Head Information Security and Risk Management, Public Investment Corporation, South Africa. Well, besides over 18 years worth of experience in cyber and information security field, Sithembile is augmented by various cybersecurity leadership roles and significant contributions in various sectors, including financial, telecom, consulting, state-owned entity, and public sectors. Thank you so much, Sithembile, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the discussions.
So ladies and gentlemen, with this, we now open the panel. It is time for you, if you may have any questions, to type it up in the Q&A during the course of the session. At the end of the session, we'll take it up if time allows. But with this, I'd now like to leave it up to the moderator to conduct it forward. Sithembile, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Papana. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm Sithembile Songo, like Papana just said. So welcome to the Women in Tech panel discussion, where we'll be talking about the rise of African cloud or cloud-connected Africa. It's a women's world indeed. I'm so excited to be surrounded by such brilliant, ambitious, go-getting, and successful women. So I'm looking forward to this fruitful discussion. I know that our panelists cannot wait to share insightful information regarding today's discussion. So we'll be touching on various topics in today's discussion, like how AI is changing the world of cloud computing, leveraging on cloud computing to speed up Africa's development, leveraging on cloud computing to speed up cloud computing in Africa. So that's what I just said. We'll also be touching on security policies. We know that there are so many risks that are normally associated with technology. So we need to make sure that we define proper security policies. We spoke about cloud-related risks that are caused by configuration. So if you put proper security policies in place, you make sure that configuration management is done properly. We will also talk about initiatives that will empower organizations with cloud adoption and the efficiency of the cloud network. So without wasting time, I'll just dive in because we don't have much time. So we've seen increased emergence of artificial intelligence. And I know that either way, one of us have benefited from AI. For instance, if you look at Netflix, it normally suggests movies that you will prefer based on the previous choices that you've made or previous movies that you've watched. That's AI. And then as you are aware that even in the cybersecurity space, you can use AI to imagine tools that we use in our environment to make sure that we optimize our detection and monitoring capabilities. So I'll just ask our panel members to share with us any AI-based technologies that they're probably using and what measures they have taken to derive return on investment from these AI technologies. So maybe I can start with you, Lavina.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for that question. So in terms of any particular products, I think a lot of the cloud service providers today have managed to up their product offerings in terms of the AI built-in capabilities, machine learning capabilities. So, you know, I think we spoiled for choice at this point in time. Where I think the real differentiator comes in is probably around pricing and how well adapted it is to us as the African continent.
Awesome. That's exciting. Let's move to our next panelist, Chinenye. Would you like to share some insights on that as well?
Absolutely agree with Lavina. So with AI-based solution, I think the cyber industry has gained a lot when it comes to these artificial intelligence solutions. Besides tech innovation that goes around, we've seen solutions like, not to mention names, but things going into the dark web to give us threat intelligence and monitoring and things that give us a better insight on how to secure your assets, information assets, as it were. So yes, there's the benefit. But with the benefit, there's always the bad as well. We can also look at the risks associated with that as well, where we see examples of, like in the case of the Emotet Trojan, they have their cloud-based solution that spreads the virus or the Trojan using spear phishing. And we know that the human is like the weakest link in any fantastically designed security architecture. And so just as the AI is being developed and having solutions that impact us positively, there's also the other side of it where AI is being used as a dominant, what's the word now? It's used to learn about dominant communications within an infrastructure, and there's the risk around it, malware increase, spreading at the fastest speed of light and things like that. So yes, that's what we have now.
Awesome. Oh, that's very insightful. Thank you for that. And you've mentioned a very profound statement when you said users tend to be the weakest link. You can come up with the best technology, but users always introduce a risk in one way or the other. And maybe that's because of the complexity of the technology. So what I like about AI is that it helps with the automation and it reduces that manual intervention that is required from the user point of view. Yeah. So again, you touched on the risks that can be introduced by AI. And we know that as much as AI is bringing a lot of good capabilities, the malicious actors can leverage on AI to supercharge the cyber attacks. So can you just share more insight on that?
So if we consider what the whole artificial intelligence is, we find that these days we have malicious actors. The hackers are also not just relying on only data stealing, they're also thinking of ways to tamper with the integrity of your information. So you can have the possibility of an AI infiltrate a network and learn all the dominant communication channels, ports, protocols, just waiting for the right time to strike and disrupt business operations. We have malware increasing in vast volumes, machine speed. There's so many. Even recently, we've heard of the cryptocurrency mining malware as well. So the whole fast-acting, malicious way of penetration that this AI can be used by hackers is something that we need to note and obviously have solutions, because the nature of cyber attacks these days are now pervasive. We can't say that you have a completely secure facility. The security threat landscape keeps evolving and growing. There's always one new thing in the landscape. There's the new attack that we don't know of. In fact, the zero-day attacks are the ones that scare me the most. But you can imagine that the speed and scale of these attacks are concerning, and organizations should protect themselves as best as they can.
Awesome, awesome. The cryptojacking day, where a malicious own stuff or to mine and get rich through you or through your CPU. So if you use AI to discover such potential attacks, it becomes quite useful for your environment. So we already derive from this AI technology, which is much good. So let's move on to our next question. Our next question is, we know that malicious actors always try to use good technology to serve their interests. We've got, on the other hand, we've got these exciting innovations that are introduced by cloud computing, right? So do you help the country or will actually accelerate developments in our Africa? You can go ahead, Lavina.
Yeah, I love that question. It's all about finding that leapfrog effect, right? That we want for our continent. So, we find ourselves at the moment in such an opportune space where I think we kind of develop, 2.5 quadrillion bytes of data a day, right? I mean, that's enormous amounts, things that we haven't even yet started to understand nor process. So, there's so many different areas where we can actually find the value. We take, for example, let's take the supply chain or the last mile in terms of logistics. If we start extrapolating information off the cloud from there, it will help to unlock a whole sort of wider access to market, right? We sit with probably around 456 million people in the continent, which we haven't even yet, tapped into. It's pretty much like the same kind of conundrum that we sit with financial inclusion and cloud, inclusion. And for me, it's the more and more we're getting dependent on cloud or on infrastructure or the internet, as much as we're seeing all of these great sort of IoT devices coming on board and, the telcos coming in and playing their space. So, that for me is a good indication that there is a need to feed into the cloud, right? There's enough data coming through. But now we need to start looking at where to next, right? What do we then do with it and how do we extrapolate the exact value from it? And for me, those things are definitely around having a very great sort of foundation in terms of data privacy, data policies, even in terms of, your cybersecurity. Those are areas where we can initially, enter the markets as a leapfrog opportunity, but doing it in terms of, having the best interest of everyone involved, right? Because the last thing we want is to find ourselves in a scenario where we don't where all our data is actually misused, right? We've seen the increase of cybersecurity. We've seen, the increase in attempts, like Chinenye mentioned, in the sort of blockchain space as well. But it's not, that's kind of expected, right? Given the volume of information we have. So it's now, what do we do and how can we then optimize it utilizing AI, utilizing blockchain, and bringing the best of those worlds together, and then creating a product that's best suited for us within the African context.
Absolutely. We've got the capabilities to be successful and accelerate development in Africa. Thank you for that insight. Sylvia, can we get your opinion on this?
Right. Thank you very much for that question. So yes, I do agree that cloud computing will definitely accelerate Africa's development. And it's for this very simple reason, right? We know that from what has been happening, that cloud computing could actually play a very crucial role in both innovation and efficiency. So we've seen a lot of innovation happening on the cloud around fintech, around agtech, around healthcare. And so just because apps can be deployed on the cloud in a very fast manner, in a very efficient manner, is already a sign that definitely it's an area that will accelerate Africa's development in those very crucial sectors. And then again, a lot of research has been done, and it's proving that a lot of organizations are opting to go on the cloud because they've realized the importance of being on the cloud, right from reducing infrastructure costs and also just being able to scale up and down rather than paying for excess on-premises capacity. And we've seen a lot of groundwork already being laid for cloud computing services to become ubiquitous in some parts of Africa. So for example, we've seen Microsoft build their cloud computing data centers in South Africa. We've seen Amazon Web Services opening up centers on the continent as well. And this location data centers definitely influences how efficiently data moves across networks. And we've also seen data centers located in Africa significantly improving the speed with which the cloud capabilities are being accessed. So, and then another area where we are seeing adoption of this is in the use of e-government services, governments adopting those services and digitizing their services to improve efficiency. And this has been enabled by the cloud. And even a research that has been done on potential use by different organizations. So for example, the Cloud in Africa 2020 report did show that 84% of African organizations are willing to move to the cloud, and a lot of cloud investment is expected to increase in the coming years, with 56% of respondents estimating that a quarter of applications they're using will have moved to the cloud by the end of 2021. So it's no longer do we need to be on the cloud, but it's more about how do we get onto the cloud and utilize the capabilities of the cloud to accelerate even faster.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said, Sylvia. Thank you. So you've said something very profound there in terms of access and the cost reductions. I know that we currently have a challenge, especially in rural areas in terms of access, but with reduced costs, cheaper infrastructure, scaling capabilities, we can definitely allow those rural areas citizens to also have access. So thank you for that. Now can we move to Chinenye?
So I absolutely agree with my co-panelist on the whole cloud adoption and African continent as it is. Since the pandemic, one of the things we've seen is that digital or economic development in Africa is being driven by digital transformation projects, the different programs on digital transformation, and all of them, or most of them, are relying on the underlying cloud infrastructure. So we're experiencing cloud growth, data center capacity growth across almost all the countries in Africa, and it's an exciting time to be around. We do hope that it will be sustained, because one of the things and challenges that we have with sustaining this kind of tech momentum, or the tech hubs that we have around, is in skills development and having the right policies and ensuring that when government continues, what has started continues, really for the better of the people. Like they mentioned earlier, they said about affordable access. So with affordable access comes with the broadband penetration as well, because we know that it's not all the places or communities that have good broadband. So all these growths are bringing transformation in the whole African economy, and it's a good time to be in.
Insightful. Thank you. Thank you, Chinenye. And again, I've also seen cloud computing or cloud adoption being a key accelerant for digital migration in our space, especially during this pandemic. So yes, cloud capabilities are really there to help us and to improve the way we do things. And at the same time, we know that malicious actors always take advantage of whatever that is good that is introduced from a technology point of view. So I spoke about triple checking earlier on. There's also ransomware that has been taking advantage of the cloud, data exfiltration, and so on. On the other hand, we know that cybercrime has been costing the country a lot. At this point in time, it costs the world about $6 trillion per year. In other words, it means that we are losing something like 190,000 per second. So each and every second, it's like we're losing $190,000 just on cybercrime. So that is why it's important to make sure that we come up with policies that can enable this cloud computing to be used in a much secured manner. So can you just maybe share with the audience the type of policies that you have worked with or that you have developed to make sure that you create a secure and enabling environment in the cloud? I'll start with you, Chinenye.
Okay, so not much of me alone developing, but more like contributing to the space. So one of the things we've seen and what everybody wants with the whole infrastructure setup is to have trust, to be sure that their data is secure and privacy is maintained. What we see across board, and even what was discussed in the previous session, is more about data localization. People are being skeptical as to where the data is going to be with this whole cloud movement. And so nations in the continent have driven or written several cloud policies for their countries. Some are in implementation states, some are the beautiful policies yet to be implemented. But for me, what I would advise is for an organization and anyone planning to migrate to the cloud, we take things, the way security is in defense in layers. So we start with what policies you want for your information. So yes, the cloud hosting company handles physical security, but is that physical security in line with your own organizational defined physical security? If it is, and if it's an improvement, then obviously that's one of the key points to choosing that cloud service provider. So we look at the policies for the supporting infrastructure, that's the physical. We can set policies on data access within your organization, and the services that you're going to have or provide from the cloud. What policies will you set to ensure that we maintain security and privacy? We look at protection or compliance, as it were, because so many organizations comply with different international best practices and standards. So, I mean, just going on to this cloud service provider, is it going to help you achieve that compliance? And what are the cyber measures in place? And obviously, encryption, whether that information is at rest or it's being exchanged across the infrastructure, and the things that people need to also consider when we talk about infrastructure as a service. We look at multi-cloud, what's that one, to avoid vendor lock-in. So you can have different cloud service providers within an organization. So basically, as As a leader in IT or as a leader in security, when you're planning your migration, these are things that should be considered. Board and management sign off on this because you understand things like breach reporting in the cloud service provider. All of these are essential to ensure that you have like a cover of day-to-day risks associated with cloud computing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well said, Chinenye. Thank you very much. You've mentioned a very important statement there about encryption, because you know these cyber criminals tend to target your crown jewels. If they know that you've got a SQL database there, they go for it. If it's not encrypted, it's in clear text, you don't. Even when they try to exploit through ransomware, it's the same thing they do. They look up, they check your backups. If they're not encrypted, or you don't make sure that only the right people have got access to your backups, then you're doomed. So it's very important to make sure that we take all those measures that you mentioned into consideration. Thank you for that. Sylvia, would you like to share some insight on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. And a lot has been said by Chinenye, but I'll just try and cover a little bit more in terms of what she could not have a chance to speak about in the limits of time. So the main security risks of cloud computing are actually around compliance violations, identity theft, malware infections and data breaches, diminished customer trust, and potential revenue loss. And different, depending on the type of cloud environment that you're dealing with, they'll be faced with different or unique security challenges. So for example, if you're looking at the public cloud services, which are being hosted by third-party cloud service providers and are generally accessible through web browsers, identity management, authentication and access control are essential. So those are areas that you would need to have a look at and define your policies around. If you're dealing with private clouds, which are usually dedicated and accessible to only a single organization, but then again, they're still vulnerable to access breaches, social engineering, and other exploits. So again, your policies have to address those kind of gaps. And if you're dealing with hybrid clouds, which combine, both the public and private kind of clouds, then you have to look at, a mix of this different challenges that are cut across this different cloud environments. So you have to sort of define your security strategy based on the areas that would affect you most and what kind of cloud you adopt. But we've also seen that there has to be control. You have to define who's in charge of which cloud environment, what kind of rights they have, who controls, passwords, for example, who has access to those platforms, so that there's accountability, because especially where there's quite a number of people having access to the cloud, then you have to be very careful and know who's accessing the cloud and how do you ensure that that information they are having access to is not landing in the wrong hands, and also not being used in an abusive manner. And then again, we talked about malware. So cloud environments typically have strong anti-malware protections and other security measures, but that doesn't mean that they satisfy the acceptable risk profile criteria for your organization. So you have to identify any gaps and ensure you have the proper cybersecurity solutions in place. And then looking at hackers, external hackers, and other bad actors who pose a constant threat to your organization, you have to be vigilant. There has to be early detection and a multi-layered security approach, such as firewalls or data encryption, vulnerability management, and threat analytics to help keep hackers out of your environment. And then the privileges that I talked about, which are insider threats, look at those. who's accessing this information, and just make sure there are controls around that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sylvia. You've said quite a number of helpful statements there. You spoke about the measures that you take depending on the type of deployment model or the type of a service model that you're choosing, whether it's infrastructure as a service, software as a service. Nowadays, we even have a new one. I just forgot the name. Yeah, but there are three of them: infrastructure as a service, software as a service, platform as a service. But there's a fourth one, or it's called serverless.
Infrastructure as a service.
No. The fourth one, it's for serverless environment. So it's got its own different name on top of these three that I mentioned. So there is a fourth one that is new, but it's for serverless environments. Yeah. But anyway, the point here is to make sure that you define your security requirements based on the service model that you chose. You spoke about identity and access management as well. That's very profound, because if you don't allow, if you just allow anyone to access your network, then you're doomed. Again, if you've got privileged users, that you don't limit. For instance, in Azure cloud, you can implement just-in-time privilege access. In other words, those privileged users don't have to keep that access 24/7. They only use it when necessary, and then it expires. So that also limits your exposure, which is quite good. Yeah, so now can we just request Lavina to add some insight on that as well?
Yeah, perfect. I think both the panelists have definitely nailed home the point of, encryption and having complete protection. So for me, I'd sort of add a slightly different angle in terms of your cloud service provider, and making sure that, their sort of digital infrastructure, which is something we don't talk about often or even give a lot of insight into, should possibly rank, as high as the encryption, right? What is their sort of plans? What are their foresights? What are their policies between other cloud service providers? What is their roadmap? Are they building, for example, smart data centers? Where's their technology? What was their latest investments in terms of startups? So, for example, are they investing in startups that have holograms and, finding ways that we can cube our data, right? And store it in the most molecular way. So I think, having a partner on board that also has that foresight is as equally important in the equation. Because, encryption is something that we need to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But then we obviously partner with cloud service providers to then look at the bigger picture. And we need to be able to then understand what their bigger picture is, and to see how much it actually aligns with the organization that we work for, or even with the continent and what we're trying to, achieve. So especially around, the digital identity and, savoring that space. Yeah, so I think, all really awesome sort of contributions, and this would just be one of mine from a different angle completely. And I'd possibly add, taking into account how much of ethical policies we actually then include, right? Because we're sitting with data. So, we've got to be more aware of the actual implications. We've seen on so many numerous occasions, the likes of the large tech giants getting in trouble for the ethical misuse of data. And I was so glad when you mentioned earlier on around Netflix, for example. I mean, they obviously sit with quite a large, streaming volume of data and flow. So does the likes of Amazon and the rest of it. But they also utilize things to their advantage, and I guess for us, it's how do we then optimize that space for ourselves?
Absolutely. Well said, Lavina. Thank you so much. Again, what I notice is it's very important to make sure that you understand what is your role in terms of that shared responsibility model, depending on the service model, obviously, that you deploy. But shared responsibility is very, very key. In other words, roles and responsibilities should be clearly defined right from the outset when you're dealing with a cloud service provider. And that should also reflect on your SLAs, because sometimes there are key aspects that we leave out when we draft our SLAs with these cloud service providers. So that's very important. Again, we spoke about AI earlier on. AI will also help in terms of optimizing these security features that we just spoke about. We've got less than 5 minutes remaining. Also, within this 5 minutes, can you just tell us whether there are any initiatives that you have in place that will help to empower organizations within the African space? I can start with you, Lavina.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. So yeah, absolutely. For me, I find we have an entity where I'm a director. It's an accelerator, so where we support startups within the space. And we've actually seen 2 startups within the cloud space within Africa. So yes, it is getting some attention. And yeah, in terms of supporting it from a policy perspective, more than happy to support in terms of formation of policies, putting out in terms of the ecosystem for startups, not only the accelerator, but also the investments in it. Yeah, and sort of very happy to offer some advisory on the ethical side of data as well. So those are the different key areas that I focus on in particular in this space.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chinenye, any insights from your side?
So most times with cloud adoption, the incentive is always around cost optimization, like Lavina mentioned earlier. It's what's going to be the return on investment and what applications are going to benefit the small, medium enterprise, either a government agency, what value is going to be derived from having moved to the cloud. So that basically starts the initiative for people to adopt these cloud solutions whichever one it is. So things that would help enforce service availability, flexibility and scalability of the systems, driving collaboration. Basically, everyone just wants to have an easier way of doing something and ensure that it is secure while you're doing it and not having the information lost along the line.
Thank you. We've got less than a minute. Sylvia, do you have something to add?
Right, just a quick one. So one of the things that will definitely accelerate adoption of cloud services is skills, having the right skills. So one of the things that we are doing at GlobalX is looking at skilling and working with different partners. So we've been, for example, in conversation with VMware, you know, on just trying to equip different demographics on cloud, you know, skills around cloud, and also because we are very passionate about women in technology, and I am also very passionate about women in technology, we're also looking at how ensuring women are not left behind when it comes to skilling around adoption of cloud.
Thank you so much. That was very insightful. It is evident from the discussions that we've had that we are definitely going to benefit from the cloud capabilities. So let's just make sure that we use them in a secured manner. Otherwise, no doubt that we will benefit as an African continent from these cloud capabilities. The world is currently at a very critical juncture. We are feeling the impact in our economy. So we just need to make sure that we leverage on these cost reductions related to cloud computing capabilities and make our country a better place. So we're out of time. Thank you very much, our panelists. You've been great. I've learned a lot from you as well. So thank you. Your input and your comments are much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you to all our eminent panelists.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Absolutely. Women in Tech done brilliantly well. Thank you once again for this incredible panel discussion.